They asked about Trey Lance and his finger and the form and the throwing and the accuracy and how all these things go together. Here's Kyle Shanahan talking about Trey Lance and his finger recovery.
I think it impacted him a ton because he had adjusted during the season just to be able to get through and adjust how, he was healthy, but it didn't heal healthy. So he had to change how he played in the middle of a year, while mainly taking scout team reps and being prepared as a number 2, except for a couple of games. So to go into the offseason, have to recorrect that. I think it took him all offseason. So he worked at recorrecting that throughout the whole offseason, and then he was just thrown into practice with us. Going into this year, that was corrected throughout last year, his grip and everything. And so I thought he got to go in this time with his time away. Just he knew what he had to focus on. He had known what he had struggled with. He had known what he had done good with. He'd gotten to see 2 different quarterbacks playing our offense 2 different ways. And I just think his time away was a lot more deliberate and in a position where he knew what he could isolate on, which I think helped him compared to last year.
Baby steps. And again, I people shared that Steve Smith comment with me so many times, which I appreciate that. Like Steve Smith, probably going to be in the Hall of Fame as a wide receiver, one of these just apex competitors of, a long time. I had a buddy that played in the NFL that I coached with, and, he was a prominent football player in college, prominent player in the NFL. I don't want to put his name out there. But I asked him, like, man, who was the toughest player you played against? Dude played corner in the NFL. And he goes, oh, Steve Smith. He goes, I had to play against him in college, and I had to play against him in the NFL, and there was just nothing I could do. He was smaller than me, but there was just nothing I could do. I love Steve Smith. Love his attitude. He's a Niners fan. He's awesome. He came out with his comments like, within 5 minutes is somebody's the guy, right? He was referencing Brock Purdy as the guy. No problem with that. But he was also referencing Trey Lance ain't it. If you ain't seen it yet, you ain't seen it. And I'm sitting there just saying, it's pretty weird to discount a player at 22 years old. That's the last time we saw Trey play, was 22. You're discounting him at that point? That's weird to me, especially whenever we already talked about a guy like Kurt Warner, right? If you did, what would happen if you discounted him at 22? What would happen if you discounted Steve Young after his first 3 years? You can go on and on and on the list there. NFL people develop. That's just the way the NFL goes. That's a good thing. Now, let's hear from Trey Lance. And a lot of stuff was made about Lance working with Holmes and throwing coaches and all that stuff. Trey Lance is one of the hardest workers, period, in the NFL, not just the 49ers. But here's a quick clip just on him talking about working with Patrick Mahomes and kind of what that did.
Learned a ton. Like I said, I was able to focus on the right things, just having a better idea. Again, even better this year coming into year 3 of what is expected of me, how to run the offense, being able to watch Jimmy and Brock play at such a high level this year. But for me, being able to be around Pat was awesome. Just pick his brain, learn about just the type of guy he is, how he spends his free time off season, and then more about his in-season schedule as well.
I like that. And again, Trey took all the first team reps the first 2 days of OTAs. Shanahan said it's going to even out with him and Sam and whatever else and all that stuff. But again, we were talking about the finger. That's not the most important thing. I said this on the John and Wayne show yesterday. Most important thing is everybody talks upper bodies with quarterbacks. It's about lower body. And one of the issues, back to Daryl's comment, you talk about the arm that Trey Lance brings, the mobility that he brings is huge. However, it also brings a downside, and that's in the throwing base that you need to have available as a mobile quarterback. Because if you're running and then you decide to throw, you got to switch up your base, right? That's the idea. And when Kyle Shanahan talked earlier this year, he said the thing that Trey has improved the most, or at least one of the things he's seen that's improved the most, is his base with his legs. And he was asked to expand on that. Here's a 30-second clip real quick of Kyle Shanahan talking about what it means and why it's so important for a player to have a good base and why Trey has that now.
It means playing with your feet wider apart, always being in a position to throw. When you're a quarterback, your feet aren't together. When you turn into a runner, your feet are together and you look to run. But then it takes you a second and a half to throw, where defenders can tee off on and things like that. And it's about always being in having to be in a certain position to throw in. So when the O-line is bad, you're not one of those guys who's just going to get sacked every time the O-line's bad. You know how to get rid of the ball, or you know how to turn into a runner and go. And that has to do with how you balance your feet out, how far you keep them apart, and how you can progress in a pocket.
Just the simple things of transitioning from a mobile quarterback to a throwing stance and all that, all those things. Accuracy starts below, not above the waist. That's just the fact. It's the facts. The first thing that you ever do with the quarterback, you get them together and you work on the feet, you work on the base, you work on the hips, you work on right that Dak twist that he quote unquote made famous. Like, I don't know why that caught on, but that should be around. And I think that's what's important there. Now with Trey Lance, and this is key. This is so important to me. And it's so weird how people just like turn and hate certain players. I hate that. I hate that people hate on players. But it's weird. Wherever Trey Lance ends up, whether it's with the Niners or somebody else, whether he's first string, second string, third string, traded, I don't give a damn. This is a great kid. Just turned 23. Trey Lance isn't looking for anything to be handed to him. He was drafted. They traded up and drafted him third overall. He never was looking for that. He's not trying to take anything away from, Brock Purdy or any of that stuff. Listen to Trey Lance talk about what he wants. What's his goal? How do you not like this kid? Listen, if you hear nothing else today, whether you're a Niners fan or not, listen to the mindset, the language. This is something to get behind.
Nothing's changed for me. Been able to focus on a lot more things that are going to help me. I'd say this offseason versus just focusing on, trying to get back to as healthy as I could last offseason. As far as the stuff with Brock, I mean, that's the same thing I told you guys last year at the end of the year. My opportunity is just to come in and compete, and that's all I wanted. So for me, I don't want to take anything away from Brock, and no one should be able to take anything away from Brock. He did what he did last year, and he deserves all the credit in the world for it. Like I said, for me, I just wanted an opportunity to compete.
That's so cool, man. Entitlement is like one of my least favorite traits in somebody, whether they think, they're entitled because of their job or their position or their what. Like, I don't, it's just, I don't like it. I don't like it. This is a kid that doesn't have that. He hasn't shown that. Not once. Not once. And so this is somebody to get behind. This is somebody to be excited about. Is he going to be starting games for the 49ers in 2 years? I don't know. There's nothing that has come out of OTAs, these press conferences, or anything that would suggest that or not suggest that. That's okay. What I do know is this is a quality individual that's working his tail end off at every facet that he can. He's got to stay healthy. You had the broken ankle. He had the finger, right? He's got all that stuff, the arm soreness, all those things. You talk about all those things. He's just got to get a chance, and he's got to show it in the game. You can show it during training camp, OTAs, preseason. We got to see it during a game. And until we do, he's not going to be regarded as the guy, right? The leader in the clubhouse. I hope he figures it out. I really, really do. Now, whenever you look at the difference between Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, or I would argue this, Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold and Trey Lance, because similar to Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy, I put Sam Darnold and Trey Lance in that same hemisphere or category or tier of guys that like to air the ball out. They throw the ball deep way more often. And now we're into that 30 to 40-yard throws. That's just not Brock's game, just like it wasn't Jimmy's. Can they throw the ball 40 yards? Yeah, they can probably throw the ball 55-plus yards. Almost anybody. Like, 1 year for a fantasy football league, we did a punt, pass, kick competition, right? And so you like stand, you throw the ball as far as you can, you kick the ball as far as you can, you punt the ball as far as you can, you add up those yards. Who gets first? Well, just so everybody knows, John Chapman got first, 100%, baby. You ain't messing with me. You ain't messing with me. But I can't throw the ball for anything. But I can throw the ball over 50 yards, and I have like no arm. Can you do it consistently and accurately and on target and all those things? That is where the advantage. There we go. But Trey can throw the ball out of the stadium if he had to. Yeah, I still believe this. I think Trey Lance has probably a top 5 arm in the NFL as far as just power and strength and whatever. what do you do with that? What do you do with that? So all this to go back to your question, Daryl, and then I want to focus on Trey Lance's comments and Kyle Shanahan's comments about him. It changes the way you play defense. It changes it. You have to have deep outside integrity, whether that's through a cover 2 or playing off man. You have to. It's pretty damn difficult to press man with a single high safety with a guy like Trey Lance there. And I would probably argue with a guy like Sam Darnold there. Darnold will air the ball out. He's got an arm. So it's different. You have to play different things. Look at this. Troy Polamalu says, John Chapman is the Andy Reid of football / throw and kicking challenges. Look at that. Andy Reid kind of found his whole thing through pass kick competitions and right up the road from where I'm at here in Los Angeles currently. He's got the high school stadium named after him over here.
The 49ers Rush Podcast.